There are moments in life when the thin veil between trust and betrayal rips apart, revealing a darkness you never imagined. For me, that moment wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic event, but a slow, chilling realization that crept up on me like a phantom limache, growing more intense with each passing day. My name is Elara, and for 6 years, I lived in a beautiful gilded cage, believing I was loved, cherished, and safe. My husband, Julian, was everything I thought I wanted: charming, successful, and seemingly devoted. He was the man who promised me forever, the one who swore to cherish me in sickness and in health. Only, it turned out, his definition of health was a lot more selective than mine. It began subtly, with whispers of symptoms that Julian dismissed, a growing fatigue he attributed to, quote, stress, and fleeting chest pains he waved away as, quote, heartburn. I knew my body, though, and something was terribly wrong. My heart, the very organ he swore to protect, felt like a ticking time bomb. The truth, when it finally shattered my carefully constructed world, was far more sinister than any illness. I found Julian, my husband, the man I swore my life to, meticulously planning my, quote, heart attack with his doctor. So, I vanished. And then, I bought the hospital. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a story of an impossible comeback, a woman reclaiming her life, and a quiet, devastating vengeance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The first time I truly felt something was amiss, it wasn't a physical symptom, but a chilling quietness in Julian. It was his 30th birthday, a milestone we'd planned to celebrate with a lavish party at our newly renovated downtown loft. I'd spent weeks coordinating with caterers, a live band, and curating a guest list that blended our high-powered social circles. But instead, he canceled everything last minute, citing an urgent business trip to Tokyo, a critical deal that couldn't wait. "Duty calls, my love," he'd murmured, pressing a fleeting, almost perfunctory kiss to my forehead before vanishing for 3 days. His hurried departure left an unsettling void, not just in our loft but in my spirit. I tried to shake off the unease, rationalizing it as typical Julian, always prioritizing work, always chasing the next big deal, a trait I'd once admired as ambition. But a knot of worry had begun to tighten in my stomach, a cold premonition of something unyielding, a sense of being an afterthought rather than a priority. The physical symptoms began a few weeks later. It started with an inexplicable shortness of breath during my morning runs along the river, something utterly foreign to a woman who could effortlessly complete a half marathon and routinely outpace most of my male friends. Then came the persistent, dull ache in my chest, a sensation I initially dismissed as muscle strain from overexertion, or perhaps just seasonal allergies. Julian, ever the practical one, offered a quick diagnosis during one of his rare evenings at home. He'd barely looked up from his tablet, the blue light reflecting off his meticulously styled hair. "You're stressed, Elara. Take a yoga class. Maybe try some of those herbal teas. You worry too much." He said it with a placating smile, a practiced charm that usually disarmed me, but his eyes never quite met mine, always darting to his phone, to his laptop, to anything but me. It was a familiar pattern, one I'd grown accustomed to in our fast-paced life. His mother, the formidable Evelyn, a woman whose every word felt like a judgment, was even less sympathetic. Over one of our mandatory Sunday dinners, at her sprawling suburban estate, she'd zeroed in on my slight pallor, and the way I winced when a sudden sharp pain lanced through my chest. "Honestly, Elara, your generation is so delicate," she'd chided, her gaze sweeping over me with disdain, as if my discomfort was a personal affront to her stoic endurance. Back in my day, we just got on with it. A little anxiety never hurt anyone. It's probably just too much caffeine. I'd forced a smile, my fork halfway to my mouth, the delicious scent of roasted lamb suddenly turning to ash in my mouth. This wasn't anxiety. This was my body screaming, a visceral alarm, but no one, least of all my husband, seemed to be listening. Their dismissals weren't just frustrating. They were isolating. I began to feel like I was shouting into a void, my genuine concerns shrinking under their collective nonchalance. The chest pains grew more frequent, sharper, sometimes radiating down my left arm, a classic symptom I'd vaguely recalled from a health documentary. I'd wake in the dead of night, heart pounding like a trapped bird, drenched in a cold sweat that clung to my silk nightgown. One particularly terrifying night, I collapsed in the bathroom, my vision tunneling, the ornate gold tiles Julian had insisted on installing for their investment value blurring into a chaotic, dizzying mosaic. I gasped for air, each breath a searing effort, reaching blindly for my phone, each movement sending waves of nausea and fiery pain through me. Julian, as usual, was fast asleep beside me, his steady, oblivious breathing a stark contrast to my frantic gasps and silent terror. He'd installed noise-canceling headphones years ago for his, quote, sensitive sleep, a habit that now felt less like a quirky eccentricity and more like a deliberate, impenetrable barrier between us. He was in his own world, and I was drowning in mine. The ambulance dispatcher's voice was a distant echo as I whispered our address between ragged, painful breaths, the pain in my chest, a crushing, oppressive weight. The paramedics, their faces grim under the flashing blue lights of the ambulance outside our apartment building, found me barely conscious, slumped against the cool bathroom tiles. "Ma'am, your vital signs are dropping rapidly. We need to get you to the hospital immediately," the younger one said, his fingers firm and urgent on my wrist. "This is a serious cardiac event. Is there someone we can call for you? Your emergency contact, Julian." Always Julian. Even as I choked out his number, a tiny, desperate part of me wondered if he would even answer, if he would interrupt his precious sleep, or whatever forward task occupied him. The emergency room was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and urgent voices. Acute cardiac event, suspected myocardial infarction, prep her for cath lab now. A kind but professional nurse, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, leaned over me, her expression a mix of concern and practiced efficiency. "Honey, we're trying to reach your husband. We've called him several times. The surgery can't wait, but we'll keep trying." I wanted to tell her not to bother, to save her breath, to spare herself the futility. Deep down, in that silent place where wives hide their most painful truths, where intuition whispers what the heart refuses to believe, I already knew. Julian had perfected the art of convenient absence over the years, missing my father's funeral because of a, quote, crucial client meeting in another state, skipping our 5th anniversary dinner for an unavoidable golf tournament with a potential investor, arriving 3 hours late to my college reunion because he, quote, lost track of time playing a new video game. But this was different. This was life and death. This was my life and death. As they wheeled me into pre-op, the anesthesiologist, a man with surprisingly gentle eyes, explained the risks in a calm, soothing voice that made everything feel surreal, like a dream unfolding in slow motion. "Your husband will be here when you wake up," the nurse assured me, squeezing my hand, her eyes full of a sympathy that pierced through the haze of pain and fear. I nodded, desperate to believe her, needing to believe that after 6 years of marriage, after all the promises and shared dreams, Julian would finally choose me over whatever else demanded his attention. My phone, lying on the sterile tray beside me, buzzed once as they prepared to take me into surgery. My heart actually lifted, a foolish flutter of hope. Maybe he was racing here. Maybe he'd finally gotten the calls. Maybe he understood the gravity. The message popped up on the screen, a stark white against the dark. It read, "Can't come, important meeting, handle it." 8 words. 8 words to dismiss the fact that his wife was about to undergo emergency heart surgery alone. 8 words that somehow managed to be both cruel and casual. Like he was declining an invitation to coffee rather than abandoning his spouse during a life-threatening medical emergency. The surgical team saw my face crumble. They saw the tears that finally came, hot and bitter, as the brutal reality crashed over me, a wave of desolation. The anesthesiologist gently took my phone and set it aside, his expression somber. "We're going to take excellent care of you," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." But I wasn't okay. As the anesthesia pulled me under, my last conscious thought wasn't about the surgery, or the searing pain, or even the raw fear of dying. It was the crushing realization that I had married a man who could reduce my life-threatening emergency to an inconvenience he could simply text away. Julian was probably ordering expensive wine and discussing quarterly projections with his, quote, important clients right now, my crisis already forgotten. The important meeting. Always the important meeting. It was his escape hatch from every uncomfortable moment, every emotional demand, every instance where being a husband required more than his minimum effort. Hours later, when I first opened my eyes in recovery, the silence confirmed what I already knew. No flowers. No worried face hovering over me, whispering words of comfort. No hand holding mine, tracing reassuring circles on my skin. Just the steady, rhythmic beep of monitors, and the sterile, antiseptic smell of a hospital room where I'd nearly died alone. A nurse, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, checked my vitals with practiced efficiency. Your surgery went perfectly, Elara, she said warmly. Dr. Thorne is a miracle worker. You're going to make a full recovery. My husband hasn't arrived yet, I whispered, my voice hoarse and weak from the breathing tube that had recently been removed. But he's not coming. The words tasted like truth. Bitter, final, and somehow liberating. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted, replaced by a strange, quiet resolve. She paused, her expression shifting to something deeper than professional sympathy, a flash of understanding in her eyes. I'm sorry, honey. Some people just don't understand what really matters in life. But I was beginning to understand. As I lay there in that sterile room, fresh stitches pulling at my chest, a dull throb of pain medication doing its job, I finally saw our marriage clearly. Julian hadn't just failed me tonight. He'd been failing me for years, one convenient absence at a time, chipping away at my sense of worth, eroding my trust. And somewhere in that moment of absolute clarity, something inside me shifted. The woman who had begged for his attention, who had made excuses for his coldness, who had accepted crumbs of affection like they were a feast, she was dying on that hospital bed. What would wake up in her place was something entirely different, stronger, sharper, and utterly, terrifyingly alone. Payon. 3 days passed in a haze of morphine and broken sleep. Nurses came and went like ghosts, their footsteps soft, checking my vitals, adjusting my IV, speaking in hushed tones about my remarkable recovery. But recovery from what? The physical wound was healing, sure, but something deeper had torn open, a wound in my spirit that no surgeon could stitch closed. I kept expecting Julian to walk through that door with his sheepish smile and some elaborate, unbelievable excuse. Maybe he'd bring those overpriced roses from the fancy florist downtown, the ones he bought whenever his guilt finally outweighed his indifference. Maybe he'd sit beside my bed and hold my hand, the way husbands do in movies, whispering apologies and promises to be better, to truly be a husband. But the door remained closed. My phone stayed silent. No texts, no calls, not even a perfunctory message from his mother. Rilipen. On the 4th morning, I woke to find Dr. Eris Thorne standing beside my bed. He was the chief cardiothoracic surgeon, a man whose reputation preceded him, known for his stern demeanor and unparalleled skill. Today, however, his usually confident presence was replaced by something I couldn't quite read, a subtle tension in his broad shoulders. He held a manila envelope in his hands, turning it over slowly, like he was weighing whether to give it to me, a silent deliberation playing out on his usually impassive face. "How are you feeling today, Elara?" he asked, his voice softer than I expected from the formidable surgeon, but his eyes kept drifting to the envelope, a subtle tell of his preoccupation. "Better," I lied, the word feeling hollow, struggling to sit up straighter against the pillows. "When can I go home?" "Soon. Your incision is healing beautifully, and your cardiac markers are back to normal. We're very pleased with your progress." He paused, then looked directly at me, his gaze piercing. "Has your husband been by yet?" The question hit like a physical blow, a fresh wave of that familiar pain. "No, he's busy with work." The excuse tasted like ash. Dr. Thorne nodded slowly, a grin set to his jaw, as if that confirmed something he already suspected, something he'd perhaps seen many times before. Elara, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Are you safe at home? Safe? The word felt foreign in my mouth, almost absurd. What do you mean, safe? Sometimes, when family members don't show up during medical emergencies, he began, his voice low, measured. It's because, he trailed off, choosing his words carefully, navigating a sensitive topic. It's because the relationship isn't what it appears to be from the outside. There are situations where a partner's absence is a sign of something deeper, something potentially harmful. I stared at him, confused, my mind trying to grasp the implications of his veiled words. Dr. Thorne, my husband isn't violent. He's just absent. Absence can be its own form of cruelty, Elara, he said quietly, his gaze steady, unwavering. Then, he held up the envelope. A woman came by yesterday. She was very specific about when I should give this to you. She said, and I quote, "Only if he doesn't show up. And tell Elara that the truth is often found in the most unlikely places, and that strength can be found in the most unexpected alliances." My heart started racing, the monitor beside my bed betraying my sudden anxiety with a flurry of beeps. What woman? I don't understand. She didn't give her name. Elegant lady, maybe mid-30s, dark hair, sharp eyes. He recounted, trying to recall details. She seemed to know you, though. Or at least she seemed to know your situation intimately. He extended the envelope toward me, a silent command. She also paid your entire hospital bill, Elara. Everything. The surgery, the medications, the room charges, it's all covered, completely. I took the envelope with trembling hands, the paper rustling softly. My name was written across the front in careful, precise script, elegant and flowing. But beneath it someone had written, in the same hand, "For when you're ready to see beyond the surface. For when you are ready to dismantle the gilded cage." Did she say anything else? I whispered, my voice barely audible. She said you'd understand once you read it. And she said to tell you that you're stronger than you think. Much stronger. Strong enough to rebuild. Dr. Thorne squeezed my shoulder gently, a silent gesture of support. I'll give you some privacy now, Elara. Take your time. After he left, the door closing softly behind him, I sat there for what felt like hours, the envelope burning a hole in my lap, just staring at it. Part of me, the old, complacent Elara, wanted to throw it away, to pretend this strange woman and her mysterious message didn't exist, to retreat back into the comfortable lie. But another part of me, the part that had been slowly awakening since Julian's abandonment on that operating table, the part that craved something real and true, needed to know what was inside. With shaking fingers, a tremor running through my arm, I tore open the seal, the paper giving way with a soft rip. The first thing I saw made my breath catch in my throat, a sharp, painful intake of air that pulled at my fresh stitches. It wasn't a photograph of Julian, not exactly. It was a faded, grainy print, clearly taken years ago, perhaps from a high society charity gala. It showed a group of people at a formal event, elegantly dressed, champagne flutes in hand. Julian was there, younger, his smile just as devastatingly charming as it was today. A magnetic force that had first drawn me in. But his arm wasn't around me. It was around a woman I'd never seen before, yet felt an inexplicable sense of recognition towards. She was beautiful, with striking dark hair cascading over one shoulder and eyes that held a quiet intelligence, a thoughtful depth. She wore a simple, elegant gown, shimmering softly under the lights, and her left hand resting on Julian's arm, displayed a ring that looked suspiciously like my engagement ring, only older, more vintage, with a subtly different setting that suggested an earlier era. Beneath the photo was a hospital bill, thick and formidable, stamped, paid in full in angry, undeniable red ink. But it wasn't my bill. It was for someone named Lena Sterling, dated 5 years ago. The details below the name sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. Extensive cardiac procedures, months of intensive care, Rehabilitation Services, Long-Term Palliative Care, Lena Sterling. The same last name Julian had before he legally changed it to mine after we married. A romantic gesture, he'd called it. A grand declaration to show his complete devotion, his break from his past. I had thought it was sweet. A sign of his commitment. Now it felt like a deliberate erasure. My hands shook violently as I unfolded the letter beneath everything else, the paper crinkling with my trembling fingers. The handwriting was the same elegant, precise script from the envelope's front, each letter perfectly formed, yet conveying an immense gravity. Dear Elara, you don't know me, but I was his wife before you. My name is Lena. If you're reading this, it means Julian has done to you what he did to me. Abandoned you when you needed him most. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry, because I know exactly how that feels. The icy grip of loneliness. The profound sense of betrayal. And I know exactly what comes next. The dawning horror. The unraveling of every false comfort. You're probably confused right now. Perhaps you're telling yourself this is some mistake, some cruel, elaborate joke designed to torment you. I thought the same thing when I first realized what kind of man I'd truly married. The darkness that lurked beneath the charming facade. But, Elara, you're not crazy, and you are not overreacting. You're just finally seeing clearly, finally peeling back the layers of deception. I know about the important meetings that run late into the night. I know about the, quote, urgent business trips that always seem to coincide with holidays and critical family moments. I know about his mother's condescending comments about, quote, women and, quote, anxiety disorders. The way she'd reinforce his dismissiveness. I know because I lived it too. Every painful, isolating moment of it. To Kay, I also know about the joint bank account he's been slowly draining, siphoning off funds into hidden accounts. The life insurance policy he suspiciously increased right before you got sick, framing it as, quote, responsible financial planning. The private hushed conversations he's been having with his lawyer about protecting, quote, Elara, I need you to understand something crucial, something that will shatter your perception of him. What happened to you wasn't an emergency to him, it was an opportunity. An opportunity he meticulously planned and eagerly awaited. I stopped reading, the words blurring on the page, my vision swimming with hot, bitter tears that had nothing to do with pain medication and everything to do with a profound, soul-deep agony. The letter fluttered in my hands, a death sentence to my illusions, as the full, devastating meaning of her words sank in. He hadn't just abandoned me. He'd been planning for this moment, preparing for it. While I lay helpless in surgery, fighting for my very life, Julian had been calculating how my potential death might benefit him financially, meticulously charting his escape, anticipating his windfall. The woman in the photo, Lena, had been through this exact same scenario, and somehow, impossibly, she'd survived to warn me. But how? And why now? What impossible twist of fate had led her to me? I looked at the photo again, studying her face more carefully, searching for a deeper connection. There was something familiar about her eyes, a haunted wisdom that tugged at my memory, something that made me think I'd seen her before. Recently. Then it hit me like a physical blow, a cold shock of recognition. The woman who'd been in the hospital elevator 3 days ago. The one who'd smiled at me with such knowing sadness, a shared understanding etched into her features. The woman who'd held the door and said, "Take care of yourself, honey. You're stronger than you know." It had been her. Lena, Julian's first wife, the wife who was supposed to be dead. The wife Julian had spoken of with such a carefully constructed sadness. A tragic loss he'd sometimes allude to, prompting sympathetic murmurs from our friends. My fingers trembled as I turned to the second page of Lena's letter, desperate to understand how a dead woman could be walking hospital corridors, paying my medical bills, and warning me from beyond the grave. I suppose you're wondering how I'm writing this letter when Julian told everyone, including his family and even his closest friends, that I died 5 years ago. He held a private, intimate funeral where he played the grieving widower to perfection. The truth, Elara, is both simpler and more devastating than you might imagine, a testament to his cold calculation. We were married 8 years ago, in the same quaint, picturesque church where you probably had your ceremony. Julian has a pattern, you see. He even recycled the same vows, the same overly saccharine promises, the same honeymoon destination in the Italian Riviera, probably the same promises about growing old together, watching the sunset from the terrace. That first year was magical. He was attentive, romantic, everything I dreamed of in a husband. He called me his angel, his guiding light, and promised to love me in sickness and in health. Then, subtly, insidiously, something changed. It started small. Forgotten anniversaries, canceled dates for urgent client calls, that distant, cold look in his eyes when I spoke about my day, as if my words were an irritating buzzing in his ear. By year 2, he'd mastered the art of being physically present but emotionally absent. Sound familiar? A ghost in his own home. Vu de voix. The heart palpitations began during our 3rd year. At first, they were manageable, just occasional flutterings that Julian dismissed as stress from your job at the gallery. "You're working too hard, Lena," he'd say, barely looking up from his phone, which seemed to be permanently glued to his hand. "Maybe you should quit and focus on being a wife, taking care of the home, truly supporting me." But the palpitations got worse. Blinding spells that left me curled up in our bedroom, gasping for air, clutching my chest in agony. Then came the dizzy spells, the terrifying memory lapses, the moments where I'd forget where I was or why I was holding car keys. Julian's response was predictable, a perfectly rehearsed script. "You're being dramatic, Lena. Everyone gets a little lightheaded from time to time. You're just looking for attention." Even when I started collapsing, actually hitting the floor unconscious, he found ways to minimize it, to turn it back on me. "Lena's always been high maintenance," I heard him tell his mother over the phone, his voice dripping with feigned exasperation. "Some women just need more attention than others, even when they're perfectly healthy. It's exhausting, honestly." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Okay, I will continue the story, picking up from where Part 3, The Unthinkable Truth, left off, ensuring to expand the narrative to contribute towards your 2-hour goal. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday, a day etched into my memory with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. It wasn't just palpitations, not just dizzy spells. It was an anomalous coronary artery, a critical congenital defect where one of my main coronary arteries originated from the wrong place, dangerously compressing the aorta. The chief cardiologist, a grim-faced woman with decades of experience, explained it in terms that made Julian's already pale face go white. "Major cardiac surgery is required, Lena, as soon as possible. Months of recovery. No guarantees about full cardiac function afterward, or even cognitive function, given the extent of the compression." Her words hung in the sterile air of the consultation room, heavy with their implications. Julian's first question, delivered with a chilling immediacy that sliced through the tension, wasn't, "Will she be okay?" or "What are her chances of survival?" It was, "How much will this cost? What's the projected expense?" Just dollars and cents. Just a cold, calculating assessment of a financial liability. The surgery was scheduled for the following month. Julian seemed supportive, almost commendably so. He asked the right questions during consultations, held my hand during difficult conversations with the doctors, even dabbed at my eyes with a handkerchief when I cried, overwhelmed by the daunting prognosis. I actually believed he was scared of losing me, that beneath his often aloof exterior, He harbored a deep love. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have conceived in my vulnerability, was that he'd already contacted a divorce attorney. 3 days before my scheduled surgery, he increased my life insurance policy to a staggering $500,000. He told me it was just being responsible, my love, in case something happened, to protect our future, to make sure you're taken care of. I signed the papers gratefully, my heart swelling with a misguided sense of gratitude, thinking how thoughtful he was to protect our future, thinking how deeply he must care. He even bought me a small, sentimental necklace, a tiny heart pendant, as if sealing his devotion. I never made it to the scheduled surgery. The anomalous artery ruptured while I was alone in our kitchen, making Julian's favorite dinner as a surprise, a slow-cooked osso buco, the aroma of which I remember vividly, bittersweet. I collapsed exactly where you probably collapsed, Elara. The same expensive Italian marble tiles Julian had insisted on for their quote, added value. The same desperate reaching for a phone that felt impossibly far away. The same husband who wasn't there when I needed him most, already conveniently absent at another, important client dinner. But unlike you, Elara, I didn't wake up in a few days. I fell into what doctors call a minimally responsive state, not quite a coma, not quite conscious. I was trapped inside my own body for 4 years and 4 months, aware but utterly unable to move, speak, or signal that I was still in there. A living ghost, conscious only of the passing of time, the muffled voices, and the crushing inability to communicate. Julian visited exactly 3 times during those long, agonizing years. Once, to sign papers transferring all our joint accounts into his name alone, claiming it was for medical expenses, the necessary administration of Lena's extensive care. The staff, sympathetic to the grieving husband, never questioned it. A second time, to authorize moving me from the expensive, private long-term care facility, which he deemed financially unsustainable, to a state-run, less luxurious, far more desolate facility. And a third time, crucially, to file for divorce on grounds of mental incapacitation, presenting my vegetative state as proof of my inability to participate in the marriage. The nurses, bustling around my bed, didn't know I could hear them discussing it. "Poor woman," one whispered, her voice laced with pity. "Her husband says she wouldn't want to live like this. He's already planning the funeral, says it's for closure." But I wasn't dying, Elara. I was listening, learning, understanding exactly who I'd married, who had married me. He sold our house 6 months after my collapse, the beautiful home we'd built together, filled with memories I could no longer access. He told neighbors I was deteriorating rapidly, and that keeping it was too painful, a constant reminder of his, tragic loss. The money, it's a substantial sum from the sale, went into accounts I couldn't access, investments I'd never agreed to, a new luxury car I'd never ride in, a new life he was building on the ashes of mine. 18 months later, he met you at some charity function, the same type of high-profile event where he'd swept me off my feet. I know because he actually brought you to see me once, early in your relationship, during one of your, charitable visits to the care home. You probably don't remember. I was just another sad case in a long-term care ward, one of many patients he paraded before you as proof of his compassion. But you were kind to the nurses, gentle with the elderly patients in wheelchairs, offering them smiles and soft words. You had no idea you were meeting your predecessor, the discarded first act in his carefully crafted play. "This is why I value life so much, Elara," he told you as you left my room, his voice heavy with feigned emotion. "Seeing Lena like this makes me appreciate every healthy day, every breath." He was using my tragedy as a pickup line, Elara, creating sympathy, painting himself as deeper, more sensitive, more complex than he truly was. 2 years after that visit, he married you. I knew because the nurses talked about seeing his picture in the society pages, his handsome face beaming next to yours. "Didn't his wife just die?" one asked. "Guess he moved on quickly," another replied, a hint of cynicism in her voice. Except I hadn't died, Elara. I was very much alive, just trapped in a body that wouldn't obey my commands, a prisoner in my own skin, listening to the world move on without me. The day I woke up, truly woke up, was a Tuesday, just like the day I got my diagnosis. 4 years and 4 months after my collapse, my eyes opened and stayed open. My fingers moved when I told them to. My voice, hoarse and weak from disuse, actually made sounds. The staff was amazed. They called it a miracle, a 1 in a million recovery. They brought in specialists, celebrated my progress, tears in their eyes. But the first thing I asked for wasn't water or food, or even a mirror to see how I'd changed. I asked for a computer. Within hours, with painstaking effort, I began to piece together the truth. Divorced while unconscious, assets transferred, house sold, husband remarried to a woman named Elara, who looked remarkably like me, just younger and more trusting. You might expect me to tell you I was furious, that I screamed and raged and planned immediate, fiery revenge. But lying motionless for over 4 years teaches you patience, Elara. It teaches you that emotions are luxuries, and survival requires strategy. So I began watching, learning about you, about your marriage, about the patterns Julian was already repeating. I saw the same distance in his eyes during your public appearances. I recognized the way he checked his phone when you spoke. I knew it was only a matter of time before he did to you what he'd done to me. The only question was whether you'd survive it. I set the letter down, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the pages. Lena hadn't just been Julian's wife, she'd been his victim, discarded like garbage when she became inconvenient, a financial burden. And now, I was living her exact same nightmare, just with different details, a slightly altered script in Julian's cruel play. But she'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, she'd clawed her way back from the edge of death to warn me. The question was, what did she expect me to do about it? What could a woman like her, having been through such an ordeal, possibly offer me in this moment of raw, shocking revelation? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I turned to the final page of Lena's letter with trembling fingers, needing to understand how a woman who had spent 4 years in a minimally responsive state could orchestrate anything, let alone whatever intricate web was clearly unfolding around my marriage. My eyes scanned the elegant script, desperate for answers, for a path forward. By now, you're probably wondering how someone who spent 4 years motionless, a mere shadow of herself, could possibly help you, let alone orchestrate anything against a man as cunning as Julian. The answer, Elara, has a name: Chloe Vance. Chloe was my best friend before Julian, during Julian, and thankfully, gloriously, after Julian. She visited me every single week during those 4 years. And 4 months when I couldn't respond, couldn't acknowledge her presence, couldn't even squeeze her hand to let her know I heard her voice. She read to me, played music, whispered stories from the outside world, and most importantly, she promised me, with an unwavering conviction, that she'd make things right if I ever woke up. She refused to let me be forgotten. Nah. Chloe is a corporate attorney. Brilliant, methodical, and absolutely ruthless when someone she loves has been wronged. She's not one for emotional outbursts. Her revenge is a cold, calculated masterpiece. She's also beautiful in that understated way that makes men like Julian feel like they've discovered a hidden treasure. Soft-spoken, with kind, intelligent eyes, the type of woman who listens intently and makes men feel like the most interesting, insightful person in the room. In other words, she's Julian's perfect target, an intelligent, seemingly vulnerable woman he could exploit and impress. He'd never suspect the steel beneath the velvet. 3 months after I woke up, after weeks of intensive physical therapy to regain basic motor skills, Chloe and I began planning. Not revenge, Elara. Revenge is too emotional, too chaotic, too likely to backfire. We planned justice. And true justice requires precision, patience, and a meticulous understanding of the enemy. Chloe spent weeks, then months, studying Julian's patterns, his habits, his weaknesses, his insatiable ego. She discovered he attended monthly art gallery openings downtown, always alone, always working the room for potential business connections, always on the prowl for new sources of attention and admiration. He'd grown lazy since marrying you, Elara. Comfortable, predictable, less cautious. The Morrison Gallery opening in March was perfect. Chloe arranged to be there as a, quote, friend of the artist, looking stunning in a simple black dress that, though understated, probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She positioned herself near the rare, expensive wine table, knowing Julian would gravitate toward the vintage Bordeaux or the exclusive champagne. He approached her within 20 minutes, his practiced charm already in full swing. "I haven't seen you at these events before," he said, using the exact same line he'd probably used on me, on you. "A fresh face is always welcome." Chloe played her role perfectly. Interested but not desperate, intelligent but not threatening, successful but not intimidating. She seemed effortlessly elegant, yet approachable. "I'm new to the city," she lied smoothly, her voice a soft purr. "Just started at Sterling & Associates." She named a prestigious, old-money law firm, knowing it would intrigue him, give her an instant air of gravitas. "I'm still learning about all the cultural opportunities here, trying to expand my network beyond the legal world." Julian's eyes lit up. A beautiful, successful woman who was new to town, clearly accomplished, and didn't know anyone yet. It was like Christmas morning for a serial predator like him. They talked for over an hour. Chloe listened intently to his complaints about work stress, nodded sympathetically when he mentioned his, quote, complicated home situation, hinting at a vague, unresolved marital issue. She skillfully extracted information about his business, his finances, his daily routine, his aspirations, painting herself as a discerning confidant. By the end of the evening, Julian, predictably, had asked for her number. "I'd love to show you more of the city, help you settle in," he said, his voice laced with insinuation, already mentally planning how to juggle his new conquest with his existing wife. Chloe accepted graciously, a demure smile playing on her lips. Then she went home and reported every detail to me, every nuance, every flicker of interest in his eyes. We refined our strategy based on what we'd learned. Julian was even more predictable than we'd hoped. His ego was a cavernous black hole, and Chloe knew exactly how to fill it. I set the letter down, my mind reeling. While I'd been lying in this hospital bed, feeling abandoned and betrayed, a carefully orchestrated plan had been unfolding around Julian, a meticulous dismantling of his carefully constructed life. He wasn't just a neglectful husband, he was actively plotting against me, just as he'd plotted against Lena. But unlike Lena, I wouldn't be facing this alone. I had an ally I'd never even met, a ghost of a past I never knew existed, and a corporate attorney who was, by all accounts, a master strategist. The envelope contained one more item I hadn't noticed before, tucked into a small inner flap. A small, elegant card with an address and a time. Café Solstice. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. A single initial, elegant and sweeping. C. I was discharged the next morning with strict instructions to rest and avoid stress. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my Uber, clutching Lena's letter, my chest still aching, heading toward what felt like the most stressful, yet most vital, moment of my life. But I had to know. I had to meet the woman who'd been playing chess with my husband while I'd been playing house, a pawn in a game I hadn't even known existed. Café Solstice was a small, intimate place tucked between a bustling bookstore and a quaint vintage clothing shop in the heart of the city's historic district. It exuded an understated elegance, with soft jazz playing and the aroma of roasted coffee beans mingling with the scent of old books. I spotted her immediately, not because I recognized her face from anywhere other than the fleeting hospital elevator encounter, but because she was the only woman sitting alone at a secluded table by the window who looked like she was waiting for someone specific. She was exactly as Lena had described, beautiful, in an understated way, with intelligent, perceptive eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and an aura of quiet confidence that drew you in without being overtly flashy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, revealing delicate silver earrings that glinted in the morning light. She held a steaming mug, her gaze fixed on the street outside. Chloe Vance looked up as I approached, and her smile was both warm and knowing, a silent acknowledgement of the storm I had just weathered and the journey ahead. Elara, she said softly, rising smoothly to embrace me like we were old friends. A gesture that was both comforting and surprisingly firm. I'm so glad you came. I was starting to worry Julian had managed to intercept you. You're her, I whispered, studying her face, the woman who had painstakingly put together this elaborate framework of truth. You're the one who's been having coffee dates with my husband? She gestured to the chair across from her. Please, sit. Though I prefer to think of it as professional consultation with a highly problematic, unwitting client. Her tone was dry, devoid of malice, simply stating a fact. I sat down heavily, my surgical incision pulling slightly, a phantom ache blooming in my chest. The cafe suddenly felt very still, the surrounding chatter fading into a distant hum. I don't understand any of this, I confessed, my voice raw, the enormity of it all pressing down on me. How do you know, Lena? How long have you been planning whatever this is? And how is she alive? Chloe's expression grew serious, her eyes losing their slight humor, becoming sharply focused. Lena and I have been best friends since law school, Elara. We studied for the bar exam together, shared dreams of changing the world, celebrated our first big cases. I was her maid of honor when she married Julian. She paused, her gaze distant for a moment. And I was also the one who found her collapsed in her apartment, the osso buco still simmering on the stove, when Julian was conveniently out of town on another, quote, urgent business trip. I was the one who fought for her to stay in that private facility, despite Julian's efforts to move her. She paused to sip her coffee, a rich, dark brew, and I noticed her hands were perfectly steady while mine were trembling, barely able to hold my own cup. I visited her every single week for 4 years, Elara. Every single week. I sat beside her bed and read to her, played her favorite music, talked to her, even when the doctor said she couldn't understand, couldn't respond. And I promised her that if she ever woke up, I'd make damn sure Julian never did this to another woman again. I swore it on my life. But she did wake up, I said, still struggling to process everything, the miracle of it interwoven with the horror. She did, Chloe confirmed, a faint, proud smile touching her lips. And the first thing she asked me to do, the very first, was to find you, to watch you, to protect you. Because we both knew it was only a matter of time before Julian showed his true colors again. He's a creature of habit, Elara, predictable in his depravity. My phone buzzed on the table, Julian's name flashing on the screen, an unwelcome intrusion. I felt my stomach clench, a wave of revulsion washing over me. Chloe noticed my reaction, her gaze unwavering. He's been trying to reach you all morning, hasn't he? She asked, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the screen, reading his frantic message. Where are you? Important. Something's wrong with my accounts. Bank won't let me access anything. He's panicking, Chloe said, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. Because as of this morning, Julian Sterling has no access to any of his accounts, his investments, or his assets. Everything is frozen, pending investigation into significant financial fraud and asset misappropriation. What? I stared at her, utterly dumbfounded. How is that even possible? He's so meticulous, so careful. Because 3 months ago, your husband voluntarily signed documents giving me power of attorney over his financial affairs, Chloe stated, her voice calm, utterly confident. He thought he was being clever, Elara, setting up protections, a safety net in case you became a financial burden, just like Lena had been. He had no idea he was signing his entire life, his carefully constructed empire, over to the best friend of the woman he tried to erase from existence, the very person who has been planning his downfall for years. My phone rang again, Julian's name flashing with insistent urgency. This time I answered, putting him on speaker. Christina, where the hell are you? His voice was tight with panic, a thin veneer of control barely concealing the rising hysteria. Something's wrong with our accounts. I can't access anything. The bank says there's some kind of legal hold, a major investigation. I'm having coffee, I said calmly, meeting Chloe's approving gaze, a strange sense of power blooming within me. With a friend. What friend? His voice was instantly possessive, laced with suspicion. You don't have any friends I don't know about, Elara. The possessiveness in his voice was suddenly crystal clear, painfully obvious. How had I never noticed it before? How had I mistaken it for care, for love? Her name is Chloe Vance, I stated, my voice steady. Perhaps you know her? Or her firm, Sterling and Associates. The silence on the other end was deafening, palpable even over the phone. When Julian finally spoke, his voice was different, stripped of its panic, cold, calculating, dangerous. Elara, I don't know what someone has told you, what lies you've been fed. But you need to come home right now. We need to talk about this rationally. About what? What happened at the hospital? Talk about what, Julian? I retorted, a sudden fierce anger igniting within me. About how you left me alone during emergency surgery? About your important meeting that was more important than your wife's life? Or maybe, Julian, we should talk about Lena. Another silence, longer this time, fraught with unspoken horror. I don't know what lies you've been told, he finally said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Lies? I laughed then, a sharp, brittle sound that surprised even myself with its bitterness, its raw edge. Is it a lie that you divorced your first wife while she was unconscious, then sold her home and appropriated all her assets? Is it a lie that you've been planning to do the same thing to me, Julian? Were you just waiting for the opportunity of my convenient heart attack? Elara listened to me very carefully. His voice had gone cold, utterly devoid of warmth. Whatever this woman has told you, whatever documents she's shown you, none of it matters. You're my wife. Everything I own is half yours. Come home, and we'll sort this out together, just you and me. Don't let some opportunist manipulate you. Chloe was writing something on a napkin. She slid it across to me. Check your personal account. I put Julian on speaker again and opened my banking app, my fingers moving with newfound certainty. My personal account, which had contained a modest $3,000 when I went into surgery, now showed a balance of $247,000. My breath hitched. How? How is this possible? I whispered, my eyes wide. Chloe wrote another note, Lena's settlement from the insurance company. She never spent a penny of it. It was always meant for this. Elara? Elara, are you there? Julian's voice was getting frantic now, tinged with a desperate edge. I'm here, I said, staring at the numbers on my screen, $250,000 staring back at me like a beacon of independence. I'm just looking at my bank account. It's very interesting, Julian. Very interesting indeed. What do you mean? What are you talking about? The panic was back, full-blown now. I mean, I'm looking at $250,000 that wasn't there yesterday, I continued, my voice steady, imbued with a strength I hadn't known I possessed. Money that came from someone who cares more about my well-being than my own husband does. Money that isn't connected to you in any way. Who gave you money, Elara? This is illegal. Whatever scheme this woman is running, it's fraud. The woman's name is Lena, Julian, I stated, watching Chloe's subtle nod of approval. Lena Sterling, your first wife. The one who's supposed to be dead. The line went completely quiet. Not even breathing. Finally, Julian spoke, and his voice was a whisper, filled with a disbelief that bordered on terror. That's impossible. Lena she's gone. Is she? I challenged, a wave of righteous anger coursing through me. Because she seems very much alive to me, Julian. Alive and angry. And apparently very, very good at long-term planning. Chloe gestured for the phone. I hesitated for a split second, then handed it to her. Hello, Julian, she said pleasantly, her voice cool and professional, utterly devoid of the emotion that had just gripped me. This is Chloe Vance, your attorney of record for all financial matters. I wanted to let you know that we've discovered some irregularities in your asset management that require immediate investigation. These irregularities are quite severe, I'm afraid. You can't do this. Julian's voice was barely controlled rage now, a guttural sound. I never gave you permission, you bitch. You have no authority. Actually, you did, Julian. 3 separate times, in fact. All notarized. All witnessed. All completely legal. Chloe countered, her tone unwavering. You were very thorough about making sure I had complete authority over your finances in case of emergency. And this, Julian. Your wife nearly died while you were having dinner with me. I'd say that absolutely qualifies as an emergency. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, a broken whisper. What do you want? Chloe looked at me, raising an eyebrow, the question a silent invitation for me to take control. The question wasn't for her to answer. I took the phone back from her, and when I spoke, my voice was steady and clear, no longer trembling, no longer choked by tears or fear. Nothing, Julian. I want absolutely nothing from you. Elara, please, let's talk about this rationally. We can fix this, darling. We can start over. His voice was pleading now, desperate, a sound I had never heard from him before. Kay, I tried talking to you rationally for 6 years, Julian. You weren't interested. You were only interested in what you could take. I paused, feeling a strange, profound sense of calm settling over me, an inner peace blossoming amidst the chaos. You left me on that operating table, Julian. You chose an important meeting over your wife's life. So now I'm choosing myself over our marriage. I'm choosing a future that doesn't involve your convenient absences or your calculating betrayals. You can't just... I can, and I am. I looked at Chloe, who nodded encouragingly, a silent, cheerleading squad of 1. You left me with nothing when I needed you most. Now, I'm leaving you with nothing when you need me most. I hung up the phone, and immediately, without a second thought, I blocked his number. For the first time in 6 years, the silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. It felt like freedom. Chloe reached across the cafe table and squeezed my hand, a genuine warmth in her touch. There's someone who's been waiting a very long time to meet you properly, she said gently. Someone who has a lot to share. Are you ready? 20 minutes later, after a quiet Uber ride through charming, tree-lined streets, we pulled into the driveway of a modest but elegantly restored townhouse in the city's historic district. It wasn't ostentatious like Julian's sprawling penthouse, but it exuded a quiet dignity, a sense of deep-rooted peace. The garden was meticulously maintained, with late-blooming roses climbing a white trellis by the front door, their delicate petals vibrant against the dark wood. It was the kind of home that spoke of quiet strength, careful rebuilding, and a love for beauty that wasn't about showmanship, but about genuine appreciation. Lena opened the door before we could even knock, as if she sensed our arrival. In person, she was even more striking than her photograph had suggested, her dark hair gleaming, her posture graceful. The years of trauma had clearly marked her. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of pain survived and battles fought, and a faint, almost imperceptible stiffness in her movements. Yet she carried herself with a dignity that was almost regal, a quiet power that radiated from within. When she smiled, a genuine heartfelt warmth spread across her features, and I saw traces of the vibrant, intelligent woman Julian had undoubtedly fallen in love with. But I also saw something harder, more resilient, a wisdom forged in the crucible of unimaginable suffering. Elara, she said, and her voice was exactly as I'd imagined it from her letter. Warm, measured, imbued with a profound understanding. Her eyes, filled with a deep, empathetic gaze, held mine. I'm so glad you're safe, truly safe. We embraced on her doorstep, 2 women who had shared the same nightmare, the same man, the same devastating realization that the person we trusted most had been meticulously planning our destruction. Her hug was gentle, yet firm, a silent acknowledgement of our shared past and a quiet promise for a shared future. It felt like coming home to a sister I never knew I had. Her home was a sanctuary. Soft, natural lighting filtered through large windows, illuminating comfortable, inviting furniture upholstered in rich, earthy tones. The walls were lined with towering bookshelves filled to bursting with books of every genre, and original artwork, vibrant and expressive, adorned every available space. It spoke of a life carefully reconstructed, filled with passion, intellect, and profound beauty. She led us to a dining room where a simple, yet exquisitely prepared, lunch was waiting. A fragrant mushroom soup, fresh-baked artisan bread, and a delicate herbal tea served in intricate china cups. The table was set with obvious care, fresh flowers in a vase, adding a touch of natural elegance. "I hope you don't mind," Lena said, her voice soft as we sat down, indicating the meal. "I thought we should meet somewhere peaceful. We've all been through enough chaos for a lifetime." For the first few minutes, we ate in comfortable silence, the gentle clinking of cutlery the only sound. There was something profoundly intimate and deeply cathartic about sharing a meal with these women, one who had literally saved my life, another who had meticulously avenged us both, and me, still processing the magnitude of what had unfolded, the sheer audacity of Julian's betrayal, and the astonishing brilliance of their response. It was a silence of understanding, of unspoken shared trauma, and of a dawning sense of hope. "So," I finally asked, breaking the quiet, the question I'd been holding back since I first read her letter. "How long have you been planning this liberation?" Lena set down her teacup, her gaze steady, unwavering. 4 years, 4 months, and 16 days, she replied without hesitation, her voice calm, devoid of any raw emotion, just a chilling precision. From the moment I woke up and learned what Julian had done, who he had become. But the real planning, the active orchestration, started when Chloe told me he'd married again. When she told me he'd chosen you, Elara, someone so young, so full of light, so tragically like I once was. Chloe added, her voice crisp and clear. "We knew he'd repeat the pattern. Men like Julian don't change their fundamental nature. They just find new victims, new scenarios to exploit. The question was whether we could intervene before he destroyed another life, before he caused irreparable harm. Your medical emergency," Lena continued, her eyes meeting mine with a profound empathy. "It accelerated our timeline. When Chloe told me you'd collapsed, and Julian hadn't shown up, hadn't even bothered to answer his phone, we knew it was time to act. It was the signal we had been waiting for, the final piece of proof we needed that he was, indeed, the same predator." I looked between them, these two remarkable women, one a survivor of unspeakable cruelty, the other a brilliant legal mind, who had orchestrated Julian's downfall with surgical precision. My mind struggled to reconcile the image of the grieving widower Julian projected with the cold, calculating monster they had exposed. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, still almost afraid to hope. Lena stood and walked to an antique mahogany desk in the corner of the dining room, a beautiful piece with intricate carvings. She returned with a thick folder heavy with legal documents, their edges crisp and official. "Now," she said, her voice firm, resolute, "we divide what's rightfully ours. What he stole, what he thought he could keep." The documents were comprehensive, daunting in their meticulous detail: property deeds, investment portfolios, bank statements, life insurance policies, even his previously secret offshore accounts. Everything Julian had accumulated during both marriages, meticulously catalogued, legally transferred, and now, redistributed. It was a dizzying display of his carefully constructed financial labyrinth, now systematically dismantled. "The house you shared with him, Elara," Lena said, her voice gentle yet unwavering, sliding a deed across the polished table. "It was the deed to the beautiful loft where I had built my life with Julian, the place I thought was my safe haven. It's yours now, free and clear. He took my home when I couldn't defend it, selling it out from under me to fund his new life. You shouldn't lose yours because of his choices. It's a fresh start, untainted by his shadow." I stared at the paper, tears pricking my eyes. The idea of returning to that loft, once a symbol of our love, had filled me with dread, a place haunted by his betrayal. But Lena was offering it back to me, cleansed. "And the investment portfolio we built during my marriage," Lena continued, indicating another thick set of papers, neatly bound. It's been split 3 ways. A third is mine, of course, the principal and the growth from the years I contributed. The remaining 2/3 have been equally divided between Chloe and you," Chloe added, her voice calm and authoritative as she pushed her own stack of documents across the table towards me. "I earned my share through legal work and emotional labor, 4 years of dedicated service to Lena, preparing for this very day. You, Elara, earned yours by surviving him, by enduring his callousness, and emerging stronger than he ever imagined. This is compensation for your suffering, for the time and energy you poured into a lie." She then pointed to a final pile of papers. His car, his absurdly expensive boat, his exclusive golf club membership, all transferred legally through the limited power of attorney he so foolishly signed. Everything he used to impress other women while neglecting his wives, every single one of those frivolous expenditures. Consider it equitable redistribution. I stared at the sheer volume of paper, utterly overwhelmed. This was more money, more assets, than I had ever dreamed of possessing independently. This is too much," I whispered, shaking my head. "I can't accept all of this. It feels like taking." Lena's voice was firm, but her gaze was kind, empathetic. "Elara, Julian stole 4 years of my life, years I spent trapped in my own body, unable to move or speak. He planned to steal yours, waiting for your heart to give out, seeing it as an opportunity. We're not taking anything that wasn't built on our backs, our sacrifices, our love that he exploited. Every asset on that table was purchased with money Julian earned while we supported him, managed his household, entertained his clients, played the role of devoted wives, all while he planned our destruction. This isn't greed, Elara. This is justice. This is reclaiming what was always rightfully ours." Chloe's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, a grim smile touching her lips. Julian's mother just tried to call him. When he didn't answer, she called his office. Apparently, he's been terminated for misappropriation of company resources, effective immediately. And they're considering pressing criminal charges. "What does that mean?" I asked, a sense of dawning satisfaction replacing my earlier shock. "It means he was using company credit cards to fund his dates with me, Elara," Chloe explained, her eyes glinting with a steely triumph. "Lavish dinner receipts, expensive hotel rooms for business trips, jewelry purchases for important clients, all charged to his firm while he told them he was cultivating new connections. His employers discovered the expenses during their internal investigation, triggered by the freezing of his accounts. A few simple audits revealed a pattern of fraud that spans years." Lena shook her head, a hint of weary amusement in her voice. "He couldn't even cheat honestly. He always had to steal to do it." Over the next hour, we sat around the dining table, signing documents, notarizing transfers, and legally solidifying the distribution of Julian's former life. It felt surreal, almost like a dream. 3 women, united by betrayal, calmly and meticulously dismantling a man's entire existence with the same methodical precision he'd used to try to dismantle ours. The stack of papers dwindled, replaced by folders filled with our new assets, our new beginnings. "What about Julian?" I finally asked, looking up from signing a particularly complex transfer document. "What happens to him now?" Chloe consulted her phone again, a quick scroll through an updated newsfeed. "His credit cards have been canceled. His lease on that downtown apartment he thought we didn't know about has been terminated. He'll be evicted by tomorrow. His lawyer, a notoriously greedy shark, dropped him when the retainer check bounced. His family, well..." Chloe gave a knowing smirk. "Funny thing about families, isn't it, Lena?" "Indeed," Lena mused, her eyes distant for a moment. "They're very supportive when you're successful, when you bring them prestige and status, and very, very distant when you're not. His mother, the same one who called you dramatic for having emergency surgery, hasn't returned his call since the news broke. His brother, who he often boasted about supporting, changed his phone number. The walls he built around himself are crumbling." As the afternoon sun slanted through Lena's large dining room windows, painting everything in a soft golden light, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine peace. Not the fragile, anxious calm of walking on eggshells around Julian's moods, always anticipating his next criticism or convenient disappearance. This was a deep, profound tranquility that came from knowing you were exactly where you belonged, surrounded by truth and unwavering support. The ache in my chest, both physical and emotional, began to recede, replaced by a lightness I hadn't realized I'd lost. "There's one more thing," Lena said, breaking the comfortable silence, her voice soft but firm. She produced a final document, pristine and official, from her folder. "This is a restraining order. It provides legal protection against any attempt Julian might make to contact you, harass you, or interfere with your new life. It's comprehensive, covering all forms of communication and proximity." I signed it without hesitation, my hand steady, my resolve ironclad. It felt less like a legal formality, and more like a sacred vow to myself, a definitive break from the past. As we prepared to leave, a sense of buoyant anticipation stirring within me, Lena walked me to the front door, the late-blooming roses in her garden perfuming the air. "Elara, I want you to know something," she began, her eyes filled with a hard-won wisdom. "When Julian abandoned you in that hospital, when he chose a meeting over your life, he thought he was proving your weakness. He thought he was proving his strength, his self-sufficiency. But walking away from someone who needs you, betraying their trust when they are most vulnerable, doesn't make you strong, it makes you empty. And empty people, Elara, lose everything eventually, because they have nothing truly substantial to hold on to." Chloe joined us on the porch, the cool evening air refreshing after the intense revelations indoors. She placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We didn't do this out of spite or simple revenge, Elara," she said quietly, her voice tinged with the profound purpose that had driven their years of planning. "We did it because women who survive men like Julian need to stick together. We need to show other women, and ourselves, that there's another way to emerge from betrayal, not broken, but remade. A way to reclaim our power, not just our possessions." 6 months later, the predictions of Julian's downfall would prove devastatingly accurate. I would learn through Chloe's quiet updates that he was working at a gas station outside the city, living in a studio apartment furnished with cast-offs from thrift stores, his once charming swagger replaced by a defeated slump. His name had become a cautionary tale in our former social circles, a whispered warning about men who view wives as disposable assets rather than cherished partners. His important contacts had vanished, his friends had evaporated, and his carefully cultivated image lay in ruins. He was alone, truly alone, something he had inflicted on so many others. But that afternoon, standing on Lena's porch with the two remarkable women who had saved my life in ways I was still discovering, I wasn't thinking about Julian at all. I was thinking about the future. My future. For the first time in years, the path ahead felt limitless, unburdened by fear or obligation. "They thought we were weak because we loved them," Lena said, her gaze sweeping over both Chloe and me, her voice ringing with the clarity of a profound realization. "We stood together, 3 women who had survived the same predator, and emerged not just intact but stronger, forged in the fires of betrayal. But love doesn't make you weak, Elara, it makes you patient." She paused, her eyes, filled with all the wisdom of someone who had literally fought her way back from the dead, met mine. And patient women win differently. The subsequent weeks were a whirlwind of activity, yet strangely, they were also the most peaceful I had experienced in years. With Chloe's guidance, I systematically began to rebuild. The loft, once a symbol of Julian's material ambition, became a canvas for my own vision. I purged every item that reminded me of him, selling off his expensive, soulless art and the cold, uninviting furniture he preferred. In their place, I filled the space with vibrant colors, soft textures, and pieces that spoke to my true self. A comfortable reading nook piled with books, a small easel for rediscovering my long-neglected passion for painting, plants that brought life and warmth into every corner. It was no longer Julian's showpiece, it was my sanctuary. Lena became a constant, cherished presence in my life. We spent hours talking, sharing stories, piecing together the fragments of Julian's manipulations that had shaped both our lives. We discovered uncanny parallels, The precise phrases he used to dismiss our concerns, the way he would subtly undermine our confidence, his talent for making us feel isolated and dependent. Our shared experience forged an unbreakable bond, a sisterhood born from the ashes of betrayal. She was an extraordinary woman, fierce, yet gentle, and her journey from near death to active justice was nothing short of miraculous. She had regained much of her physical ability through sheer force of will, but it was her mental resilience that truly astonished me. She was living proof that one could not only survive such an ordeal but thrive beyond it. Chloe, the mastermind behind Julian's undoing, remained a formidable ally. She not only handled all the legal complexities of my new assets, ensuring everything was ironclad, but also offered invaluable advice on navigating this new chapter. She taught me about financial independence, about setting boundaries, about recognizing red flags in relationships that I had previously ignored or rationalized. She introduced me to her network of equally brilliant, accomplished women, a circle of support that was vibrant, authentic, and utterly unlike the superficial connections Julian had always prized. These women, in their own ways, had faced challenges and emerged stronger, embodying the very essence of what Lena and Chloe had fought for. One evening, a few months after the initial shock had worn off, Lena, Chloe, and I sat on my newly adorned balcony, sipping wine and watching the city lights twinkle below. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the distant hum of urban life. "Do you ever wonder what he's doing now?" I asked, my voice devoid of malice, simply curiosity. Julian felt like a distant, almost forgotten dream, a bad memory receding into the past. Chloe chuckled softly, swirling the wine in her glass. "My sources tell me he's struggling. The fraud investigation is still ongoing, and given the extent of his deceit, it's unlikely he'll ever practice in finance again. His former colleagues are avoiding him like the plague, and his, quote, influential friends have all vanished. The public disgrace for a man so obsessed with image must be a worse punishment than any jail sentence." "Good," Lena said simply, her gaze fixed on the horizon, a faint smile on her lips. "He inflicted a different kind of imprisonment on us. Now he gets to experience his own." "And his mother?" I asked, remembering Evelyn's biting remarks. "Evelyn is quite isolated," Chloe replied. Turns out Julian was her primary source of financial support and social climbing. Without his success, she's lost much of her standing. The calls for anxiety are likely more frequent now, but for herself. There was no joy in this, no triumphant gloating. Just a quiet satisfaction that justice, in its own slow, methodical way, had prevailed. We had faced a common enemy, and, through solidarity and strategic thinking, emerged not just survivors, but victors. Got it. I'll craft Part 9 as the concluding section, bringing the story to a satisfying close and wrapping up all the narrative threads. My recovery continued, both physically and emotionally. The physical scars on my chest began to fade, a testament to Dr. Thorne's skill, but the emotional scars, though deeper, were also healing, slowly but surely. Julian's absence from my life was a profound quiet, a peace I hadn't known existed. I started taking long walks in the park, feeling the sunlight on my face, truly breathing for the first time in years. My painting easel became a place of solace and expression, the canvas filling with vibrant colors and bold strokes that reflected my newfound freedom. One afternoon, a few months after Julian's world imploded, I received a package. It was from Lena. Inside was a single, elegantly framed photograph. A crisp, professional shot of Lena and Chloe standing side by side outside a sleek, modern building. Beneath the photo, a silver plaque read, "Sterling and Vance Philanthropic Holdings." A small note was tucked into the back. "Remember what I told you, Elara? About strength in unexpected alliances? This is just the beginning. Come visit us soon." Lena was not just rebuilding her life, she was building an empire dedicated to helping others escape similar traps. She and Chloe had channeled all the recovered assets, all the legal settlements, into a foundation dedicated to protecting vulnerable women from financial exploitation and abusive relationships. They provided legal aid, safe housing, and career counseling, offering a lifeline to women who, like us, had been left vulnerable by deceitful partners. My heart swelled with pride and a deep sense of gratitude. Their work was monumental, turning their pain into purpose. But for me, my own path was still unfolding. I had the loft, the financial security, and the unwavering support of Lena and Chloe. Yet, a part of me still yearned for something more, a way to truly reclaim the very space where my nightmare had almost ended. One crisp autumn morning, a thought sparked within me, clear and undeniable. It was audacious, perhaps even impossible, but it resonated deep within my core. I remembered Dr. Thorne's kindness, the nurse's gentle hand, the sterile hospital room where my life had nearly slipped away. I remembered the powerlessness I felt, the stark realization that my very survival had been at the mercy of a system Julian had tried to exploit. And then, I remembered what Lena and Chloe had taught me, that true power isn't about control over others, but control over your own narrative, your own destiny. I called Chloe. "I have an idea," I said, my voice crackling with excitement. "A big one." "I'm listening," she replied, her tone always sharp, always ready. "That hospital," I began, my gaze sweeping over the cityscape from my balcony, towards the gleaming glass towers in the distance, knowing one of them housed the very medical center where I'd fought for my life. "The one where I had my surgery. I want to buy it." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. Then, Chloe's incredulous laugh. "Elara, are you serious? That's one of the largest private medical centers in the city. It's worth hundreds of millions." "I know," I said, a smile forming on my lips. "But think about it. Julian's insurance policy, Lena's settlement, all the assets we recovered. It's a significant amount. And you two have access to capital, to investors. We could do it. We could create a medical center truly dedicated to patient well-being, where no one ever feels abandoned, where every woman is truly heard." Chloe was quiet for a long moment, the gears turning in her brilliant legal mind. "It's ambitious, Elara, but not impossible. It would take immense resources, political maneuvering, a team of top-tier professionals. But imagine the impact. Imagine the statement." Over the next year, that ambitious idea blossomed into a formidable reality. Chloe, with her unparalleled legal expertise and network, spearheaded the negotiations. Lena, drawing on her own harrowing experiences and her deep understanding of patient needs, became the visionary behind the new hospital's mission and patient care philosophy. And I, Elara, used every penny of my newfound wealth, every ounce of my renewed spirit, to fund the acquisition, to breathe life into this dream. It was a complex, arduous process. There were endless meetings with hospital boards, investors, city officials, and medical ethics committees. We faced skepticism, resistance, and the monumental challenges of acquiring and transforming such a massive institution. But Lena's unwavering vision of compassionate care, Chloe's ruthless efficiency in business, and my own deeply personal drive propelled us forward. Finally, on a clear spring day, almost exactly 2 years after my emergency surgery, the headlines blared. Prominent medical center, acquired by philanthropic group, new leadership promises patient-centric care, focus on women's health. The former CityView Medical Center was officially rebranded as the Elara Medical Institute, a name chosen by Lena and Chloe, a quiet acknowledgement of my journey. It wasn't just a hospital. It was a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope born from the depths of despair. I stood on the newly renovated helipad, looking out over the city. Below me, the sprawling complex of the Elara Medical Institute bustled with renewed purpose. Every floor, every room, every policy had been redesigned with patient dignity and comprehensive care in mind. There was a dedicated wing for women's health, a robust patient advocacy program, and a foundation to cover treatment for those who couldn't afford it. We established a strict protocol for patient contact, ensuring no one would ever be left alone or unheard during a crisis, their needs dismissed. Dr. Eris Thorne, who had quietly resigned from his previous position to join us, stood beside me, now the chief of surgery at the institute. "You've done something remarkable, Elara," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "You turned a personal tragedy into a legacy of healing." Lena joined us, a proud, serene smile on her face. "It's more than a legacy, Eris. It's a promise. A promise that no other woman will suffer what we did, abandoned and vulnerable, within these walls." Chloe arrived, her phone still in hand, but her eyes softening as she took in the view. "Speaking of legacies," she said, a mischievous glint in her eyes, "I heard from one of my sources. Julian Sterling was recently sighted picking up discarded cans outside the old financial district. Living under a bridge, apparently. The last of his pride, completely gone." A quiet satisfaction settled over us, not of malice, but of equilibrium. Julian's meticulously built world had crumbled, leaving him with nothing, exactly as he had left us. Our lives, however, had blossomed. The Elara Medical Institute became a national model for patient-centered care. Lena served on the board, ensuring its mission remained true. Chloe continued her legal work, now often defending women escaping similar situations, bringing them to our doors. And I, Elara, found my true calling not just as its owner, but as a driving force behind its vision, working closely with the staff, meeting patients, ensuring that every person felt seen, heard, and cared for. My heart, once a ticking time bomb, now beat strong and true, not just for myself, but for every woman who walked through the doors of the Institute. We thought we were weak because we loved them, because we invested our hearts and our lives. But love doesn't make you weak, it makes you patient. And patient women, united, with a vision of justice and a fierce resolve, win differently. We don't just win battles, we transform the very landscape of the fight. This story of strategic justice and powerful transformation had you on the edge of your seat, didn't it? Hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Elara decided to buy the hospital, a truly epic moment of reclaiming power. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe to our channel for more tales of resilience and triumph.